I walked into my room, and on my bed, there was a Bible filled with sticky notes outlining all the reasons why it was not okay to be queer.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Pursuit the Pod, and welcome back to another episode in my You're Not Alone series where we talk about body image, breakups, basically all the moments in life where we can tend to feel the most alone. And today I'm very happy to share with you a conversation I had with Gavin. Gavin opened up about his struggle with coming to terms with the fact that he is queer. Not only this self acceptance, but also his journey telling his family and their reaction. Over the course of the summer, he shares his story to over 1,000 campers. But the interesting thing is that he rarely talks about this with his family and friends. So I was so grateful that he came up and shared his struggles, from recognizing that sometimes he doesn't want people even to recognize that he's queer and accepting that part of himself. Being known for your struggle versus somebody seeing you as the whole person that you are. And the interesting part of still working to accept yourself, even as you're sharing your struggles and your story as you're going through it. So, Gavin, thank you so much for coming on the pod and talking with me today. I'm so grateful for you sharing your story because we could send it to somebody now or in 5 years when we know somebody who's also struggling with accepting that they're queer and going through that journey. So, without further ado, here is Gavin's story.
So I grew up in a very rugged and rural environment. I think it's very interesting to see how different my life has turned now, where it's like I live in the cities. I think that there was a big push to a rural lifestyle. I grew up playing almost every sport possible: basketball, baseball, gymnastics, soccer. If you if you can name it, I did dance for a little while. I grew up as a very lively child. I think a lot of the way media can portray queer people is that there's a big moment of aha, I've realized this now, a gay awakening, as a lot of people call it. For me, it wasn't quite like that. There's a big gradual process of realizing that there's a little bit that was different to me. In the talk I give at TLC, I always started off by being like, I always realized I was different in some way. And I always used to think it was just because I'm naturally blonde and prettier than everyone else. I think it's a great way to start it out because it's a really lighthearted way to, get everyone engaged, but also it's a pretty heavy story. And so it keeps it a little lighter. There's a distinct memory I have of I was at my cousin's cabin. My entire family, all five of us, stayed in one bedroom. I remember there being a time where I was on a lower bunk of a bed there, and I was by myself, and I was reflecting about my life, and I realized at this point that I was queer, and I just remember being so devastated and just like crying myself to sleep
Oh,
and not
wow.
knowing because I couldn't share this with anyone. Especially, when you're in fifth grade and you're realizing that there's an aspect of you that, is hated in so many ways, knowing that that's not something you could change and struggling by yourself was definitely interesting. But I was pretty young when I was, just first kind of coming to terms with some of these things. Like I said, maybe fourth or fifth grade.
And what made you feel like you couldn't share it?
Well, like I said, I grew up in a really small town. And with small towns, you can kind of sometimes get really small mindsets. Many of these people have never even left our small town, right? I had seen so many people older than me bully other people for having this lifestyle, or even
Mhm.
in middle school, I wore a pair of joggers one day and they were called my gay pants. When you grow up in small areas, you can kind of see just small microaggressions around different things. And then all of a sudden
Mhm.
the small microaggressions get tolerated enough. I never felt like it would be a really big issue inside of my family. But I think just, growing up in these small areas, it can be really confusing, especially as a kid,
Mhm.
who you can trust and who you can't. You always want to believe
Mm.
that you can trust your family members with things and you can trust your friends, but oftentimes that's not always the case. Growing up, I was always really tiptoeing around the idea of being queer with anyone. And it's just a really confusing time.
In the talk, you mentioned that you had a best friend and you wanted to tell them that you were queer. Can you talk to us a little bit about that experience and their ultimate reaction to that?
When you grow up with a secret, all it does is just eat away at you and eat away at you until you want to tell other people. And you need to share that with someone. You need to have someone where you can think through things with, and that way it's just not all being put on your shoulders. For me, that was one of my best friends at the time. We would do everything together. We'd go golfing together. We'd play basketball. I'd go over to his house. We'd swim in his pool. Like literally almost every single day, I was with him. One day we were hitting in the batting cages. We were kind of talking, and I was like, "Hey, do you think you would do if one of your friends, said that they were gay?" He turned around and he goes, "Well, I just probably wouldn't be friends with that person anymore."
Ugh,
And it was devastating to me because this is someone
ugh.
who I had spent all of my time with growing up. And I kind of pushed him on it. Like, why would you do that? And he was like, I wouldn't want them to develop a crush on me or anything. I was sitting there being like, well, I've never once had a crush on you.
That's probably the assumption, right? Is like right away, if there's like a lesbian, it's like two girls, they automatically like each other if they're friends, or if it's two
Absolutely.
guys.
And that was a big problem of mine growing up is everyone would just assume that I, was attracted to them, which is
Mm.
almost never the case with a lot of friendships with queer people. Growing up with him, created a big divide around being able to share things with people. It was one of the first times where I had even talked about anyone of a different sexuality with anyone.
That's one of your first experiences is, "Oh, I wouldn't be friends with you,"
Exactly.
and
Now my mentality around sharing it was if I share who I am, no one is going to want to be friends with me. When you're young, we talk about now about pride and being proud of who you are, especially when this is not something that you get to choose. It can be very difficult to be
Mhm,
proud of who you are. For me, working on being proud and really not even accepting myself, and then
mhm.
going to other people and having them not accepting me either, is just a
Oh,
big hurdle to kind of get over. Because now not only do I have to get over the hurdle of liking myself, I have to get over the hurdle of liking myself even when no one else does.
you go from having this interaction with your best friend, and then where along in this path do you tell your family?
I can't remember this person's handle, but their name is Braulio, and I saw them on TikTok, and it was this queer creator, and he kind of shared his story about coming out, which is who I got my inspiration from, and I just wanted to give that shout out there. I thought it was so stupid that I had to announce my sexuality. And so for a long time, I really didn't want to. But I also, really struggled with the idea of there being any confusion around what I was and, what this could be. And so I knew for certain that I wanted to tell my family because it felt important to me that they knew who I was. You know, a lot of times what happens um, when you are struggling with something like this is you become very isolated. Your first thought um, about being queer is one that is just to yourself. And then you come up with this entire identity that you've been keeping to yourself. And it is really a gateway to becoming very isolated about so much more in your life. When you can't talk
Mm,
about a massive aspect of yourself,
mhm.
um, then it becomes a really big struggle to talk about even the smaller things. And so I had decided as a kid that I didn't want to have to come out to the rest of the world, right? Because it didn't feel right to me. However, I wanted to tell my family because I felt like they deserved to be certain on that aspect. Wrote letters to my entire family. I wrote individualized letters to every single person, printed them out because I don't write, and and then I signed them with my signature, and I
Mm.
put them in envelopes, and I put them in my bookshelf behind a basket and hid them away. And then on December 31st, I went to I called my cousin and I asked if we could go shopping. I kind of told her the rundown a little bit of what was going on because for some reason I had really trusted her. And so I kind of told her what was going down and I had asked if we could go shopping and we could leave the house so that I could tell everyone about the letters and where they were and they could go get them. We left, we went to Goodwill and Kohl's and a bunch of just like random shops and spent some time while I reflected on whether or not this is what I actually wanted to do. And eventually I texted my younger brother and I said, "Hey, there's some letters behind this basket on my bookshelf. Would you be willing to grab them and give them to everyone?" And he texted, he's like, "Yep, absolutely." Um, this was my freshman year of high school. They got their letters, and my younger brother texted me and was just like, "Hey, I just want you to know, like, I love you no matter what. I'm really proud of you." And
Aw.
that was great. I always
Yeah.
knew that he would be accepting. He's an amazing kid, and I love him so much.
Uh-huh.
Um, but he was the only person that texted me.
Uh, okay.
And it was New Year's, and I knew that my cousins had a New Year's party that we would normally go to. However, we weren't this year. I was debating now. No one has responded to me except for my younger brother. I'm really nervous. I've just shared this big aspect of myself, and an aspect I'm worried that, I would not be accepted for. Some things that had ran through my mind as the 14, 15-year-old going through this is, am I going to have to move out? Am I going to have, like, am I going to be kicked out after this? Am I
Mhm, mhm,
going to have to find different ways to live? How am I going to support myself if this doesn't go the way I need it to? This is also in the middle of the pandemic. And so there's a lot of questions around what life will look like after the pandemic, or if there even will be an after the pandemic. And then at the same time, I'm questioning, how am I going to be able to support myself if this goes poorly? And I really credit that a lot of that to um, what has allowed me to grow up really quickly. I decided to go home. I had to park at the end of the driveway and just wait for me until I would text her and tell her that it was okay. And I got home, went inside. Eventually, they were like, "Well, like, let's talk about this." They sent my younger brother to his room, and they're like, "Hey, we just want you to know that we love and support you no matter what." Right? And
mhm,
I was so
mhm.
grateful. There was this big relief that had kind of came
Yeah.
off of me of being like, um, just so, you've been carrying something for so long, and you finally get to see that, this might not be as big of a problem as you think it is.
Mhm,
And but there was something that was still weighing on me, and it was the fact that they had sent my younger brother to his room to have this
mm,
conversation.
mhm.
And I had loved that they, said that they would love me no matter what. But I was like, hey, why did you send Chase to the other room for this conversation? And they're like, well, we just don't think he's old enough to know about this. My mom actually had taken the letter that I had given Chase away from him,
Oh. Huh,
um, after he read it,
huh.
because she didn't want him to know.
Interesting.
Um, and like a big aspect of my life growing up, just another thing to add is, both of my parents are very well known in the small community of my
Mhm,
hometown.
mhm,
And so growing up there also kind of been a spotlight on me of, oh, well, you're so and so's kid, right?
mm,
And so there was always this aspect of, being perfect for the public image.
mm,
And when, he was sent to his room and everything, it felt like this was, you know, something that would be okay inside the three of us, me and my parents.
mm.
But outside of the three, it was still a scandal that kind of needed to be silenced, right?
Oh,
Which,
interesting.
yeah, was a big, just a new weight on my shoulder of,
Yeah.
well, maybe this is okay, but it's not outside of this. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's still a lot of growth that needs to happen in, or there was still a lot of growth that needed to happen for me at this time. But, this was one of the moments where I was probably the most proud of myself at the time, right? And so then to be so proud and to at least tell other people about it and being like, you know what, I actually don't care if this is going to go poorly, because I just need you to know that this is who I am and this is not going to change about myself.
Mhm,
It was a really big moment. And to have it kind of be more of a scandal now instead of a just kind of a secret was difficult for me. And so I had pushed back on it a lot and been like, why do you send Chase to the room? Why does this need to be a scandal? Why is this, why?
yeah.
And throughout the course of the night, it just got to be really intense. And the night ended with slamming doors and
Oh,
everything else. And just
uh-huh,
like a big, went back to my room. And I'm not known as someone that's ever going to cry, right? And
uh-huh.
I normally never cry. I just remember going back to my room and just sobbing and sobbing and,
Oh,
you know, feeling so alone in these moments. It felt like all of the kind things that they had said about always being there for me and always loving me had kind of just been a ruse to get me to sweep the scandal under the rug a little bit, and it felt just
Uh,
very,
uh-huh.
very like just very fake in the sense of the family needed to be protected, and this is the way that they were going to protect it. So I kind of felt really awkward moving forward, not really sure still where I stood with people. They
Yeah.
had I never really knew before because we had never talked about it. And now that we talked about it, I was still confused because there were still those messages of "we'll always love you," and then there were slamming doors, and it was really confusing of
Yeah.
where exactly I had kind of stood here. But then 3 days later, I walked into my room, and on my bed there was a Bible filled with sticky notes outlining all the reasons why it was not okay to be queer.
Oh my gosh.
And I think that as a kid is where I really broke.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I did not know what to do. This is an aspect of myself that I had really been trying to train myself for so long to not be ashamed of.
Yeah.
And now there's literally a manual in my hands outlining why I should be ashamed of this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like physical evidence that's
Physical evidence.
for some reason who you are, what you feel is wrong for
I had a good relationship with my faith as a kid. I grew up really faith driven person. I would turn to Christianity all the time, right? I would pray every single night. And it was just a way for me to kind of connect with someone in some way. The Bible framed this as a negative thing, and it
Mhm.
really challenged my faith to be connected to that in some way. And then when the Bible was literally used against me in this way,
Oh my
I really
gosh.
struggled with that concept as well.
'Cause had you found it kinda sounds like you found relief in having, God and that presence and that spirituality, and then now it was being used against you. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I remember praying as a kid almost every night and just,
Mhm,
you know, praying for good health and as a kid I would always pray for all the people who were struggling in the world and
mhm.
all those different things. And now when religion had been used to attack me, it
Yeah.
felt so weaponized in a way that um just really and kind of turned me off religion for a bit. It felt like this was
Mhm.
now no longer a tool used to build people up, but a
Mm,
tool to put everyone in this forced conformity of this is
mhm,
how we live and this is the right thing to do. And I think, there's a really twisted mindset around the right way to live, which the
mm,
right way to live in my head is whatever way is going to make you happy. There's
mhm,
ways to live for other people, and if living for other people brings you joy, then that's what you should do. But if certain things are only going to cause you turmoil and dissatisfaction, then you don't have to do that. Everyone talks about eating super healthy, of like being like, oh, I'm going to eat just a salad every single day, but like some people hate salads, and so it's like, well, that's not the right way to live if you're going to live your life hating every single time you have to eat.
How since then has your relationship with faith and your queer identity how do you reconcile that nowadays?
My mentality around religion right now is it's really hard for me to worship someone that allows their words to be used against other people
Mhm,
or to
mhm,
be used to put other people down. While I understand that this person potentially, would still love me and do all these amazing things, they allow their persona to be used to hurt me in the
mhm.
beginning. Really difficult for me to support an idea like that that could be used to hurt other people. And so I've definitely, strayed away from religion just based off of how it was used to hurt me. It's definitely just a very unique aspect of my life where I don't really relate to it as much anymore. But I still definitely understand that it could be a true concept and absolutely could help so many people. It's just not something that I've been turning to as much anymore.
When you ended up going to your room, doors were slammed, you were crying, and you felt
Mhm.
really alone in that moment. Have you what got you through some of those toughest moments that you felt alone?
When you are young and you're struggling with something about yourself, you have to be a certain level of confident in who you are in order to share that with other people. Then when other people turn you down, you have to be confident enough to build yourself back up.
Mm.
I think in a lot of people's stories, they always talk about how they had someone to turn to, right? They
Mhm.
always had a second person who, was their rock throughout all of it. And in my life, my rock was always myself. I was always called the right fighter as a kid, right? I always had to be right. And in this instance, it really, really helped me fight for what I believed in. And it really helped me fight for the chance to be who I, knew I was. And because I knew I was right in the way I wanted to love myself and other people, I knew that I could stand on this and rise above these challenges.
It sounds like you had this belief that it's like, "No, this is actually okay." Like, I know
Yeah,
that this is okay about me, and the people around me are not with this, but internally, you had that confidence. How did you get that acceptance for yourself?
I think this is where the light of media really comes into my story. I talked about the inspiration behind coming out being, queer creators online. When you get to see other queer people being accepted and being in that light,
Mhm,
there's a desire to push for that kind of acceptance. For me, it was a way for me to see that it was going to be okay. This is why pride matters so much. You get
mhm,
to see so many aspects of pride and people being proud of themselves. And for a kid that's really struggling with self-acceptance, that's really, really important. And if you followed me on Instagram, you'll see that during Pride Month or throughout the year, I am constantly posting things on my story about why we need pride.
mhm, mhm,
And it's because that I know somewhere out there in a small rural town, probably in Wisconsin, there's a little kid that needs to see that it will be okay. 6 years ago, I was that little kid. Neither can be a curse in some ways, but in this way, it was a really big blessing for me to know that I was not alone.
I resonate so much with this because I went through some food struggles and body image and, not really wanting to eat and all that, and the first time that I felt some an ounce of relief was when I would find girls like me online who made videos and podcasts talking about their struggles. It was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know anybody in person who has gone through this, but those girls online that I would watch and listen to, they were my first relief." You realize you're not first of all, you're not the only one in the whole world who's thinking this, and then it becomes a little bit easier to bring this up to one person in real life. I really resonate with the media being the first outlet. So, were there ever like, did you ever transition to having then people in person?
The first person that I really connected with, or one of the only people I really connected with, was my high school Spanish teacher,
Mm,
and who also happened to be my high school tennis coach. There's a big stereotype around queer people not being able to be athletic. As a queer person who wasn't accepted, all I wanted to do in life was to prove to other people that I was worth it, that I was worth being accepted and I was worth the friendship. And one of the ways I wanted to show that was by breaking the stereotypes of being the queer person, right? I wanted to be the big athlete and I wanted to do all the things that everyone told me I couldn't. But the problem with that, and a lot of time in sports, you need someone to play that sport with. In tennis, I needed someone to hit with. Growing up, I was often told by a lot of people that they wouldn't hit with me because of my sexuality.
wow.
And I was like, well, that's okay. I'll go get private coaches. And I had coaches turn me away because they said that they didn't want to coach queer athletes. They can be really frustrated. And still, as someone who is still struggling with accepting themselves, a lot of people think that the coming out process can be very simple in the aspect of you struggle, you accept, and then you live.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
that's often not really the case. It's often you struggle until you've accepted enough, but there's often still so much struggle that you're still going through because every
Oh,
single
it's
time
so
that
real.
someone pushes you a little bit back, that's more ground that you now have to regain. And so every single time I got turned down to hit with, every single time I got turned down to coach with, it was a really big struggle for me to understand that this was okay in myself. Every single time one person brings you down, it takes way more effort to build you back up.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I talked about, my high school Spanish teacher. She told me about tennis and life camps, just recommended that I give it a try. For me, it was more like well, these people don't hate me yet. This is,
Oh,
I get to
wow.
go to a camp and I get to go somewhere where I'm not constantly attacked. And at bare minimum, I will have a mellow week filled with no personal attacks. And it was the first place where I really felt fully accepted. It was the first place people would hit with me. I remember that first year so vividly. It meant so much to me in those moments. Have a place where I could feel accepted. I credit that to allowing me to push myself further because I think without some place where I could see that it was going to be okay, there would have been almost no purpose for me to continue and keep pushing myself forward.
Feeling alone is it's one of the worst things we can feel as a human. You're coming to terms with yourself. And then when you have the world like reinforcing the negative parts of what you already think about yourself at that young time, just breaks my heart. Feel for not only younger you, but probably even current struggles because you're so right. When we go through something, it's not always a clean story. Oh, then one day I was cured and now I never struggle with it at all. There's always little triggers. If you struggle right now, what are some of the things that you tell yourself?
One way that I live my life in order to be happy is by helping other people. So I work at TLC now as an instructor, and I give my story as part of a way to be the representation in the world that I didn't get to see as a kid. They'll come up to me during camps and they're like, "You're so brave. Thank you so much. This is a great way to start conversations with my kid." They're like, "So glad you've moved past that." That's one thing I'm always like, well, I haven't moved fast. I'm still living. This is still my
Mm.
life. Once I'm done with work in August, I still spend all of August back in that small town, back in my childhood home where we don't talk about my sexuality. After I received that Bible on my bed, I didn't talk to a lot of my family. For a long time, it was now in isolation of having no friends, but also in isolation of having no family. Now that I come back here every year, my mom is one of my best friends now. We've really, she like everyone has grown so much, but there are still aspects of my life that we don't talk about, this being one of
Mm.
them. And it's not like a shameful we don't talk about it. It's more just like if we can avoid the conversation, we will, which is partially on me too. There are opportunities where I could bring up more things and I actively don't because I just don't want to put myself in that mindset again. The only reason, how do I have the courage to do all those things, is because it's what I wish someone else did to me. It's not because I'm massively proud of who I am. In fact, there are often days where I still sit here and I go, God, I wish this was not a part of my personality. I actually gave this speech to our entire staff for about a month and a half before I gave that speech. I was talking with one of my best friends there, going, I don't want to do this. I don't want to give this speech because I don't want this to be the thing that people see when they see me. I
Mm.
don't want to be known as the gay staff member at TLC. There's so many other things about me, right? I'm
Mhm.
naturally blonde, and people don't talk about that enough. And I think a lot of people don't realize about the people who are outwardly proud is the fact that oftentimes they don't want to. It's more of a moral obligation around there's someone who is really, really fighting right now
Mhm.
to stay alive. And as that person years ago, it is really important to me to give back to other people. I stood with the director of tennis and life camps, Neil Hagberg, and I went, Neil, I don't know if I can give this speech.
Mm.
He's like, well, why? And I was like, I've given this speech 12 other times to 12 other camps, but now there's an aspect of this is a family camp. These are kids. And not only are these
Mm.
kids, these are kids with their parents.
Uh-huh.
And I struggled to give this story because of the way family has treated me. And I was really worried me being who I am would upset a lot of the people at TLC,
Mm.
especially talking about it in front of their kids. Neil talked to me and was like, you don't have to give this story if you don't want to, but think about the minds it can open. Tell them that you're really nervous to tell the story at the beginning. The people at TLC have my back constantly. And it's one of the ways I can really accept myself now is by having other people who I know accept me. So
Mhm.
even though this is still a struggle I go through all the time, it was more of a moral obligation. And sometimes that can also be a struggle. I don't want to get up early and give a speech about how to love yourself right now because I really don't feel like I love myself right
Ah,
now
yep.
to have other people around me going, you know what, Gavin, I really love you. Having those people around me really pushes me to continue to work on my growth and my acceptance.
How you highlight that the struggle doesn't end. Like, just because you talk about it and you give a beautiful speech about it doesn't mean that you don't struggle anymore. Just because you have a story and you have, a way that you've overcome part of it doesn't mean you're fully healed. You know it's a really good thing that what you're doing. And
Yeah,
then at the
yeah,
same time, it's like it's hard to keep bringing this up for yourself constantly, and people see you as this person who has healed and is fully cured, and it's an ongoing thing, and you can have overcome certain parts of it, but then also are working through it, and that's okay.
yeah. I tell the story about how I walked into my room and my mom had put a Bible on my bed. And when I tell that to the campers, you can see the reactions that everyone has.
Mhm.
And when I told that this past camp, I looked at one of the parents in the crowd, and she was looking at her kid. And it was the first time I almost cried during this reflection. Normally,
Oh.
this is something that I've really moved past, right? I'm pretty well healed about it now.
Uh-huh.
But for the first time, I almost cried giving this reflection because there was so much that I could see going on in that one glance to her kid. And I was so nervous. When parents hear this, it forces them to think about what would they do when their 8-year-old camper is sitting there, and they could also be struggling with the same things, and they wouldn't know. Thinking that this parent right now is thinking about how they would handle the situation. And I was so worried that this could also be a look of, I hope that I don't have to go through this. I
Mhm.
hope that, my kid doesn't turn out this way either. When a parent looks at their kid, when I'm telling a story about how my parents treated me, it's, really interesting to not know whether or not they're thinking of that was the right way to handle it or that was the wrong way to handle it. Which is part of the reason why it almost brought me to tears, was because I couldn't know what the outcome of that look was going to be
Mhm.
until later in the camp. That parent came up to me and just went, "Hey, I want to thank you so much for being so vulnerable. I haven't gotten the chance to be able to talk about something like this with my kid yet. And you opened the door for us to have that conversation and know
Oh
that he's
gosh.
accepted in those ways." And that truly
Oh my
is
gosh.
what really allows me to do this, right? Even though I still struggle with it constantly, getting to see that it has genuinely changed lives and gotten people to talk about the topic and push new ideas and concepts of different ways that treating people can affect other people, and seeing that it had an impact is really what helps me push forward in my times of struggle.
That's what we can do is right is share our ideas, share our life experience, and that's what humans have always done. And the fact that you're able to turn pain into positivity. It's not a being smiley and being always happy about what's going on, like it's struggle, but it's positive in the sense that it's moving in the forward direction.
Pain and positivity is that's, I've never heard of it, and that is such a great way to put it. But it's really important to not forget about that pain that
Yep.
people have experienced,
Yep.
like,
Like hold
because
space for
if
the pain.
absolutely. I think if I didn't still sometimes struggle with this, I probably wouldn't speak about it as much as I do. I'm like, well, this isn't actually that much of a problem. And
Yeah.
like, going through it wasn't actually as hard as I thought it was. There's no need to go through it. Recognizing how difficult it was for me, and then going talking about it to campers, turning it into that bright light is so great.
What do you feel like you struggle with nowadays?
To me, it's the same struggles all over. It's just now I'm a little bit further along than I was when I was a kid. So I still struggle with the acceptance, and I still struggle with being different. It's what's pushed me forward so much. It's these struggles that have pushed me to be so much further than I ever thought I would be. No matter what age you are, it's always the struggle of acceptance. It's always the struggles of how you look and how you talk. And, well, do I talk too gay? And do I walk with a certain type of walk that I need to switch? And then there's the concept of, like, do I talk too gay? And is that something I need to change about myself? I was on the phone with one of my best friends. He was like, do you have a gay voice? And I was like, I know that I do. And, like, especially when I get really excited certain times. And he was like, do you how you feel about it. And I thought about it and I was like, no, I really hate it because I don't want people to recognize just off of my voice that I'm queer. And it's something I'm still struggling about with well, why don't I want them to recognize that?
Mm, hmm.
But then it, just continually bounces back to the identity piece of, do I want this to be something that people know about me? Which is why I struggled to talk about it at TLC too, is because, there's the aspect of being a great athlete and that's why you're at TLC. And then the
Hmm.
aspect of you're at TLC because you're queer and
Hmm.
because you have a great story.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, yeah, but I was also, formerly one of the number one high school tennis players in the state of Wisconsin. I'm
Uh-huh.
good at tennis and that's why I'm there too. It can just be the confusion around what you want people to know about yourself. And that confusion never
Yeah.
fully goes away. The struggles, they stay the same, although I've grown so much and the level of acceptance I have for myself now is a lot more than I've had for myself than when I was a kid. But those they're not complete. And I don't know if there ever will be. It's always pushing me forward. And that's what I can really appreciate this.
It's like holding multiple identities at once, not getting too attached to even just one identity. How do we hold these multiple identities and be seen for the entirety of who we are as a person?
Absolutely.
When you're one of the only staff members who are openly speaking about this, it's really easy to just be known as this person. And so it's really interesting how you talk about, okay, how do I speak up for this? Because inside I feel it's right to speak up about it, but also like this isn't the entirety of who I am.
And I think it kind of wraps back to that aspect of, constantly pushing forward and constantly struggling of being like well, now I've been categorized as this.
Hmm.
Is that what I want to be categorized with?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Now now I've become known for this. Okay, do I want to be known for this? And then if I don't, is it bad that I don't want to? Once I hear people speak about something that's caused them grief, it has a way of releasing the grip that that thing has around them. I think it's a
absolutely.
really powerful message for kids to hear. You can be the gay, bi, lesbian, all of the different identities on your tennis team, and you can still just you're still just a really good player at the end of the day. Like
Yeah,
we all have a lot of identities, and our society does put so much weight on what our sexuality is. Becomes this like defining thing about your character and who you are and like your capabilities. Like your capabilities in sport having anything to do with the fact of who you like,
absolutely.
breaking those associations that we accumulate in society is really interesting to explore.
When you hear other people talk about it, it can really inspire you to kind of, share your own voice. And I texted my friends actually right before I hopped on this pod and told them, and I literally texted them, I go, hey, I know that I don't really share this about myself because it's not, like you said, not one of the categories that I want to be one of the main ones. But I texted them and I was like, hey, I know I don't really talk about this much with you guys. But I'm doing this. I can let you know when it comes out if you'd like. When you see me talk at TLC and you know that I'm giving this speech to thousands of people every summer, there must be some aspect of being like, wow, this person, is really, really proud and very certain of who he is and what he wants and how he wants to be perceived. But, this is not something I have actually ever talked about with any of my friends. And I think one of the reasons I'm able to do it at TLC is because I know that in 3 days, I won't see those kids anymore. And so
Mm,
they can hate me for 3 days and I can tolerate 3 days of hate and then they
mm,
will leave and it doesn't
mhm.
matter. I texted them before this and I was like, hey, I know that, I don't talk about this very much with you guys, but if you'd like to hear more of it, it's going to be put out here and I can let you know when it's put out if you'd like. Things like this are what, continually push me to better myself and to better my friendships with other people. And when you first originally approached me about the podcast, my first thought was, I never actually talk about this. And
Yeah.
especially on like one-on-one settings, like this is,
Uh-huh.
it's hard for me when so much of my time is spent being above just a person. When it's at TLC and I'm not just a person, I'm the coach and I speak about all these things. I do, since sometimes these personal connections can be really difficult to make where it's, well, now you get to see me as the human I am. and the struggles that I do
Oh,
go through.
wow.
So getting to connect with you is such an amazing opportunity for me to be able to start these connections with other people and being to creating that better acceptance even in myself, being able to talk about it a little bit more is so amazing. This is why I appreciate you allowing me to come on this podcast and join you.
There's so much to that because there's almost the sense of when you're at a coach giving that speech, you're stepping into you're stepping into this role of like role model to kids. And then it's like, okay, but who is Gavin for people to really know you? Like for your friends to really know this side of you. Thank you even more for being willing to come up, and I had no idea that this was something that you didn't really talk about. So
Yeah.
thank
Well,
you even more for your vulnerability, and for anybody in Wisconsin and Gavin's friends. I'm so happy that you're listening.
shout out to my friends Yvonne and Helen who responded in the group chat, and Landon who did not. I want it to be on record that he did not respond. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for creating these spaces for people to be able to do this. You never know how much a small action can mean to so many other people. My story is not finished, and I think that's really
Mm,
important for people to remember
mhm.
of their role models. They think have really helped them is knowing that their story is not finished.
Well, guys, wasn't that so insightful from Gavin? Gavin, thank you again so, so much for coming on the pod. I truly, truly appreciate your vulnerability. I was so surprised when you said that, you don't really talk about this with your friends and your family quite as much, and you have the courage to do so for thousands of campers that come through Tennyson Life camps every single summer. So, truly, thank you so much for your time. It's so powerful to know that our journey continues. We are cured in some ways, but we keep working through the struggle in other ways. That's such a valuable insight that I got out of this conversation, and the importance and the struggle that comes with accepting yourself. So, Gavin, thank you so much. We will share this with anyone who needs it now or in 10 years or whenever somebody could resonate with this message. So, thanks again. And thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. This You're Not Alone series always means a lot to me. So, I really appreciate you guys listening. And I hope you gained so much good perspective from Gavin, just like I did. And with that, I will surely see you guys next Tuesday. Bye.